I was folding towels in my kitchen when my daughter Lisa called about our family vacation. "Mom, we've decided you should just stay in your room during meals and activities. You know, to avoid any drama." The line went dead before I could respond. 8 years I had worked double shifts to save for this trip. $4,200 from my own pocket for 12 family members. I set down the towel and took a slow, steady breath. Then I walked to my desk and opened a folder I hadn't touched in months. But there was something they didn't know about me, something I had discovered just weeks earlier that would change everything. My name is Estella, and this is how I learned that sometimes the people who underestimate you the most are the ones closest to you. They thought they were so clever with their secret plans. What happened next at that beachfront hotel taught my family a lesson about respect they'll never forget. Because when you've lived 65 years, you learn a few things about patience, timing, and exactly when to remind people who they're dealing with. That folder contained bank statements showing every transaction I had made for this trip. $4,200 in careful increments over 8 months. I traced my finger over the withdrawal receipt from March 15th when I sold my wedding ring to George at the pawn shop downtown. He had offered me $350 for the gold band that Joseph gave me 42 years ago. I remember how the fluorescent lights made the diamond chips sparkle one last time before I handed it over. The money felt warm in my palm when George counted it out in 20s. I can still smell the yeast from those Sunday mornings when I baked pies for the church fundraiser, earning $15 each. Apple cinnamon, cherry, and pecan became my specialty. Mrs. Henderson from Oak Street would order 2 every week, paying me in cash that I folded carefully into an envelope marked family trip. The kitchen would be so hot by noon that sweat dripped into the flour, but I kept baking. 30 pies meant $450. 60 pies meant $900. I counted every dollar twice. The hardest memory is from that cold February morning when I walked 12 blocks to the grocery store instead of taking the bus. My arthritis made each step feel like walking on broken glass, but those $2 saved meant $2 closer to bringing my family together. I bought generic bread and store-brand soup, skipping the aspirin I needed because every penny mattered. When I got home, my hands were so stiff I could barely open the soup can. But I opened that bank account app and transferred another $50 to savings. Lisa called me 3 times that month asking for money. Her car needed repairs, she said. Then Diego needed help with his mortgage payment. Monica wanted me to cover groceries for a week because James was between jobs. Each time, I wanted to tell them about the trip fund, about how I was planning something wonderful for all of us. But Raphael had made me promise to keep it a surprise until he was ready to announce it. So I sent them money from my regular account instead, eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner while they ordered takeout. The bank statement showed 17 different transactions to my children between January and August. $730 to Lisa, $420 to Diego, $380 to Monica. Money I could have saved instead of sacrificing my wedding ring. Money that could have bought me decent winter boots instead of wearing the ones with holes that let in rain and snow. I had given them everything while cutting my own life to the bone, and they called me dramatic for wanting to be included in conversations. That night after Lisa hung up on me, I spread all the receipts across my kitchen table like evidence in a crime scene. The receipt from the hotel booking showing my credit card charged in full. The emails confirming 12 guests under my reservation. The printed itinerary I had studied so many times. The paper was soft from handling. Every piece of paper told the same story. I had funded their vacation and somehow become the burden they needed to manage. I remember sitting in that kitchen, surrounded by the arithmetic of my love for them. 8 months of sacrifice reduced to numbers on paper. The heating bill I paid late because I chose the trip deposit instead. The prescription I refilled every other month instead of monthly because I needed the money for their dream vacation. The worn spots on my shoes from walking everywhere to save bus fare. Each sacrifice had felt meaningful when I imagined us all laughing together on the beach. But now I understood what those sacrifices had actually purchased. Not gratitude or inclusion, but the privilege of being managed like an inconvenience. They had taken my money and my hope, then made plans to hide from me during the very trip I had made possible. The cruelest part was how they had let me believe I was finally going to matter to them. They had let me pack my nicest clothes and feel excited about spending time with my grandchildren. They had watched me glow with anticipation while secretly planning to minimize my presence. The wedding ring felt especially symbolic now. Joseph had saved for 3 months to buy that ring before he proposed. It represented his commitment to building a life together, to honoring the bond between us. I had worn it through his cancer treatments, through the lean years when his construction work was slow, through raising 3 children on a tight budget. That ring had been through everything with me, and I sold it to fund a vacation where my own children planned to treat me like an embarrassment. When I finally went to bed that night, I stared at the ceiling for hours. The house felt different somehow, like something had fundamentally shifted in its foundation. I had always told myself that family came first, that my comfort mattered less than their happiness. But lying there in the dark, I realized that philosophy had become a one-way street. I gave them everything, and they gave me management strategies. I offered love, and they offered tolerance. I funded their dreams, and they planned ways to avoid me. The next morning brought clarity I had not expected. I woke up knowing that something had changed permanently in my relationship with my children. Not because they were flawed people, but because the dynamic we had established was poisoning all of us. They had learned to see me as a resource to be managed rather than a person to be respected. And I had taught them that lesson by accepting less than I deserved for so many years. This pattern had a name, though I had never thought to call it that before. Financial abuse, emotional manipulation, elder exploitation. The terms felt harsh when applied to my own family, but they fit nonetheless. My children had developed a system for extracting resources from me while minimizing my role in their lives. They called when they needed money, then made plans to avoid spending time with me. They accepted my generosity, then criticized my personality traits behind my back. The WhatsApp group, Mariana would later show me, was just the most obvious evidence of a dynamic that had been building for years. They had learned to coordinate their approach to managing me, sharing strategies for getting what they needed while limiting their emotional investment. The vacation was supposed to be different. I thought it represented a new chapter where they actually wanted my presence, not just my financial support. But the conversation with Lisa revealed the truth. Even when I paid for everything, even when I made their vacation possible through months of personal sacrifice, they still saw me as a problem to be solved. They had accepted my money and immediately started planning ways to minimize contact with me. The reservation confirmation in my name meant nothing to them except access to rooms they could not afford themselves. I had enabled this pattern by never setting clear boundaries about how I expected to be treated. When they were children, I taught them that my needs came last, that family harmony meant I should always compromise, always accommodate, always put their comfort first. Those lessons had created adults who saw my generosity as an entitlement rather than a gift. They had no framework for respecting me because I had never required respect as a condition of my love. The painful truth was that they were not necessarily bad people, but they had learned to interact with me in destructive ways. Lisa hanging up when I tried to discuss their decision was not malicious, but it was completely dismissive. She had learned that she could cut off conversations when I brought up topics she did not want to address. Diego and Rafael had learned they could make financial plans involving my money without consulting me. They all had learned that my feelings were less important than their convenience. This dynamic had become so normal that they probably did not even recognize it as abuse. They likely saw themselves as practical people managing a difficult situation. The secret WhatsApp group was just efficient communication in their minds. Planning to dispute charges after enjoying the vacation was just smart financial strategy to them. Excluding me from activities was just keeping things peaceful. They had normalized patterns of behavior that were fundamentally disrespectful. The most insidious part was how they had convinced me to participate in my own marginalization. I had accepted smaller and smaller roles in family gatherings. I had stopped expressing preferences about holiday plans because they always found reasons my suggestions would not work. I had learned to be grateful for whatever inclusion they offered, rather than expecting to be treated as an equal member of the family. I had become complicit in a system that treated me like a peripheral figure in my own family story. But that morning after Lisa's call, something shifted. Maybe it was the starkness of her dismissal, or maybe it was seeing all those receipts spread across my table. But I finally understood that this pattern would continue until I changed it. They would keep taking my money and managing my presence until I required something different from them. The vacation they had planned would happen exactly as they designed it unless I intervened. For the first time in years, I felt angry instead of hurt. Not the explosive anger that leads to dramatic confrontations, but the cold, clear anger that leads to strategic action. They had made plans that involved me without consulting me. They had taken my money and plotted to avoid me. They had let me sacrifice for months while secretly preparing to minimize my enjoyment of what I had purchased. That was not acceptable anymore. I knew I needed help navigating this situation properly. My usual approach would be to have an emotional conversation with each of them individually, hoping to change their hearts through vulnerability and explanation. But that approach had failed me repeatedly over the years. They would listen sympathetically, make promises about doing better, then return to the same patterns within weeks. This situation required a different kind of response. I called Janet Morrison, my lawyer, at 9:30 that morning. Janet had helped me with Joseph's estate planning and had always been straight with me about legal realities. I explained the situation carefully, reading her the exact words Lisa had used and describing the broader pattern I was recognizing. Janet listened without interrupting, asking clarifying questions only when she needed specific details about dates and amounts. "Estella," she said when I finished, "what you're describing has legal implications beyond family dynamics. If they're planning to dispute charges for services they intend to use, that's potentially fraudulent. If they're coordinating to exclude you from a vacation you funded, that could constitute elder financial abuse. I think we need to document this situation very carefully before you travel." Janet explained that family financial abuse often goes unreported because victims assume legal protection does not apply to relatives. But the law recognizes that exploitation can happen within families, especially when older adults are involved. She recommended that I document all communications about the trip, secure my financial accounts, and consider whether I wanted to proceed with the vacation under these circumstances. Her advice crystallized something I had been feeling but could not articulate. This was not just a family disagreement or communication problem. This was a situation where my legal and financial rights were being threatened by people who assumed I would not defend myself. They were counting on my desire to keep the peace, my reluctance to create conflict, my pattern of prioritizing their comfort over my own protection. That afternoon, I called my bank and spoke with Carmen Rodriguez, the customer service representative who had helped me set up the vacation savings account. I explained that I had reason to believe someone might attempt to dispute charges on my credit card for a hotel reservation, and I wanted to place a note on my account, documenting that all charges for the Beach Vista Resort were authorized by me personally. Carmen was extremely helpful, asking me to email her copies of the reservation confirmation and my correspondence with the hotel. She placed a fraud alert on my account that would require additional verification for any disputes involving the hotel charges. She also gave me a reference number for our conversation and suggested I keep detailed records of anyone who had access to my reservation information. The phone call with Carmen lasted 45 minutes and left me feeling more in control than I had in months. She treated the situation as serious and legitimate, validating my concerns without making me feel foolish for worrying about my own family. Her professional response helped me understand that taking protective measures was reasonable, not paranoid. I was not overreacting by preparing for scenarios my children had literally discussed. That evening, I called Miguel Santos, the manager at Beach Vista Resort. I had spoken with him twice during the booking process and remembered him as courteous and thorough. I explained that I was the primary guest and payment source for a group reservation, but I had concerns about how the vacation was being planned by other family members. I wanted to clarify exactly what my rights and options were regarding the reservation. Miguel listened carefully and then explained the hotel's policies in detail. Since the reservation and all payments were in my name, I had complete authority over the booking. Other guests were essentially my invitees, with no independent claim to the rooms. If I wanted to modify the reservation, cancel portions of it, or change the guest list, I had the right to do that with appropriate notice. He offered to flag my reservation in their system so that any changes would require verification directly with me. The conversation with Miguel revealed options I had not considered. I was not powerless in this situation simply because I had already paid. The hotel recognized me as the primary guest with decision-making authority. If my family was planning to treat me as an unwelcome addition to a vacation I had funded, I had alternatives they were not expecting. This knowledge felt like a secret weapon, a source of power they had not accounted for in their planning. By the end of that day, I had assembled what Janet called a protection strategy. My bank account had fraud alerts that would prevent unauthorized disputes. My lawyer had documentation of the family's plans and my concerns about them. The hotel knew I was the primary guest with full authority over the reservation. I had created a foundation for protecting my interests if the family proceeded with their announced plan to marginalize me. But I was not ready to act on any of these options yet. First, I wanted to see exactly how they intended to treat me during the vacation. I needed to witness their behavior firsthand before deciding how to respond. Maybe Lisa's harsh phone call had been a moment of frustration that did not represent their true intentions. Maybe they would include me naturally once we were all together. Maybe I was overreacting to family drama that would resolve itself. So I decided to proceed with the trip as planned, but with something I had never had before when dealing with my family: a backup plan. They could choose to treat me with respect and include me as a valued family member, or they could proceed with their plan to manage and exclude me. But this time, their choices would have consequences they were not expecting. This time, I would not absorb their disrespect silently. The morning we left for the beach, I felt strangely calm. My suitcase was packed with clothes I had chosen carefully, outfits that made me feel confident rather than invisible. My purse contained copies of all the reservation documents, Janet's business card, and Carmen's direct phone number. I had created a support network they knew nothing about. For once, I was entering a family situation with more information and resources than they realized. When Rafael picked me up, his coolness was immediately obvious. He barely made eye contact, loaded my suitcase without comment, and spent the 2-hour drive talking exclusively to his wife, Monica, about their plans for the week. I sat in the back seat listening to them discuss restaurant reservations and activity schedules that did not include me. Every conversation confirmed what Lisa had told me on the phone. I was expected to occupy space quietly while they enjoyed the vacation I had purchased. The hotel lobby was even more beautiful than the website photos had shown. Marble floors, fresh flowers, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. I felt a moment of genuine excitement, imaging how wonderful this week could be if we were all here to enjoy it together. But as we approached the front desk, Rafael and Monica walked ahead without waiting for me. Diego and his family arrived and immediately joined Rafael's conversation circle, leaving me standing alone with my suitcase. Only my granddaughter Mariana seemed to notice my isolation. She walked over and took my arm, asking about my trip and telling me how excited she was to spend time together. Her kindness felt like water in a desert, a reminder that not everyone in the family saw me as a burden. But watching her parents and uncles ignore my presence while standing in the lobby of the hotel I had paid for crystallized everything that was wrong with this dynamic. The check-in process revealed just how little they understood about the reservation details. Raphael approached the desk clerk and started to explain that he was checking in his family group, giving his name and credit card. The clerk looked confused and asked for the reservation confirmation. When Raphael could not provide it, the clerk asked me directly if I was the primary guest. The moment when I confirmed that everything was booked and paid for under my name was the first time all day that Raphael actually looked at me directly. After we got our room keys, the family immediately made plans to meet for lunch without consulting me about my preferences or availability. They discussed restaurants and timing while I stood there holding my suitcase, clearly expected to either follow along or figure out my own arrangements. This was exactly what Lisa had told me would happen. I was welcome to exist in the same space as them, but not to participate in planning or decision-making about activities I had funded. That first night, I sat alone on my room balcony, looking out at the ocean and processing what I had witnessed. The beautiful view I had dreamed about for 8 months felt hollow when experienced in isolation. They were all somewhere in the hotel enjoying dinner together, having made it clear that including me would somehow diminish their experience. I had paid for their paradise and been relegated to observing it from the margins. But instead of feeling devastated, I felt something unexpected: resolve. They had made their choice about how to treat me, and now I could make mine about how to respond. I was not trapped in this dynamic. I had resources and options they knew nothing about. Tomorrow, I would begin implementing a plan that would give them exactly what they had asked for: a vacation without drama from me. They just might not like what that actually looked like. The next morning brought the revelation that changed everything. Mariana knocked on my door early, looking upset and holding her phone. She explained that she had accidentally been added to a WhatsApp group called Drama-Free Vacation that included all the adults in our family except me. She had been reading their messages for 2 days and finally decided I needed to know what they were saying about me. The messages were worse than I had imagined. Lisa had written, "We just need to keep Mom busy and out of our hair. Let her think she's part of things without actually including her in anything important." Diego had responded, "Exactly. We can smile and nod when she talks, then do our own thing when she's not around." Monica had added, "I brought extra activities for the kids, so we have excuses to be busy when she wants to hang out." But the most shocking message was from Raphael. "Don't worry about the money situation. I already talked to the bank about disputing these charges after we get back. We can claim Mom authorized the deposit, but we never agreed to the full amount. We'll get most of it refunded and she'll just have to deal with it." Anna had replied with laughing emojis. "Perfect. She'll be so embarrassed about making a scene that she won't even fight it." Reading those messages felt like being punched in the stomach. They had not just planned to exclude me emotionally, they had planned to cheat me financially. They were going to enjoy the full vacation I had paid for, then try to stick me with the bill by lying to the bank. They had calculated that I would be too humiliated to defend myself legally. They saw my desire to avoid conflict as weakness they could exploit. Mariana was crying as she showed me message after message of them mocking my excitement about the trip, joking about my dramatic personality, and strategizing about how to minimize their interaction with me. They had turned their treatment of me into a group activity, bonding over their shared irritation with my existence. The granddaughter who loved me had to witness her parents and relatives discussing me like I was a problem to be managed. "Grandma," Mariana said, "they're not good people." "I never realized how mean they are about you until I saw these messages." "You don't deserve this. You've been so good to all of us, and this is how they talk about you behind your back. I'm ashamed of my parents right now." Her validation meant everything to me. For months, I had wondered if I was being too sensitive about how they treated me. Maybe I really was dramatic. Maybe I expected too much from family relationships. Maybe I should be grateful for any inclusion they offered. But seeing their actual words removed all doubt about the reality of the situation. They saw me as an ATM with annoying personality traits attached. That afternoon, while they were all at the beach without me, I made 4 phone calls that would change the trajectory of this vacation permanently. First, I called Janet and read her several of the WhatsApp messages. She confirmed that planning to dispute authorized charges constituted attempted fraud, and she could help me document everything properly. She also noted that their coordination to exclude me from a trip I had funded might qualify as elder financial abuse under state law. Second, I called Carmen at the bank and explained that I now had written evidence of family members planning to file false disputes against my account. She immediately escalated my case to the Fraud Prevention Department and had me email screenshots of the relevant messages. They placed additional security flags on my account and created a detailed record of my proactive report about potential fraudulent activity. Third, I called Miguel at the hotel and explained the situation fully. I told him about the WhatsApp group, their plan to dispute charges, and their stated intention to exclude me from activities during a vacation I had funded. I asked what options I had if I decided I no longer wanted to host family members who were treating me this way. Miguel was sympathetic and professional, explaining that I could cancel their room access with 24 hours notice since I was the primary guest and payment source. Fourth, I called Dr. Patricia Williams, a therapist who had helped me process grief after Joseph's death. I needed professional perspective on what I was experiencing and guidance on how to respond in a healthy way. Dr. Williams listened to the whole story and affirmed that I was dealing with a clear pattern of financial and emotional abuse. She emphasized that protecting myself from exploitation was not selfish, but necessary for my well-being. By the end of that day, I had assembled a complete support team. My lawyer was documenting the legal issues. My bank was protecting my financial interests. The hotel was prepared to enforce my rights as the primary guest. My therapist was helping me process the emotional impact and plan healthy responses. For the first time in this whole situation, I felt like I had more power than the people trying to exploit me. But I still was not ready to act. I wanted to give them one more chance to treat me with basic respect. Maybe seeing me alone and clearly hurt would activate their consciences. Maybe they would recognize that their behavior was cruel and adjust it naturally. Maybe family bonds would prove stronger than their apparent contempt for me. I decided to wait and observe their behavior for another day before implementing any consequences. That evening, I joined them for dinner at the hotel restaurant, hoping that sharing a meal might create an opportunity for genuine connection. Instead, I watched them bond with each other while treating me like invisible furniture. They discussed plans for the next day's activities without asking my input. They shared inside jokes I was not part of. They took photos that excluded me. When I tried to contribute to conversations, they responded with polite but dismissive comments before returning to topics that excluded me. The cruelest moment came when little Sophia, Raphael's daughter, asked if I wanted to build sandcastles with her the next morning. Before I could answer, Monica interrupted. "Grandma Estella needs to rest, sweetie. She's tired from traveling." Sophia looked confused because I clearly was not tired, but Monica had effectively prevented me from making plans with my own granddaughter. They were now actively blocking my relationships with the grandchildren to maintain their control over family dynamics. That night, I made my final decision. They had demonstrated conclusively that they saw me as an obstacle to their enjoyment rather than a family member worthy of respect. They were actively preventing me from connecting with my grandchildren. They had planned to cheat me financially. They mocked me in private while accepting my generosity publicly. This pattern would continue indefinitely unless I created consequences that forced them to reconsider their behavior. At 8 in the morning, I walked down to the hotel business center and spent 2 hours preparing documentation. I printed out screenshots of all the WhatsApp messages Mariana had shown me. I wrote a detailed timeline of events from the initial phone call with Lisa through the previous evening's dinner. I created copies of all my financial records related to the trip. I prepared a formal letter explaining my decision and the reasons behind it. Then I walked to Miguel's office and informed him that I was implementing the cancellation option we had discussed. I wanted the room access for Rafael, Diego, Monica, and Anna terminated at 10 o'clock the next morning, giving them exactly 24 hours notice as required by hotel policy. I would be keeping my own room and Mariana's room, but the other 4 rooms would be canceled immediately. Miguel confirmed that this was entirely within my rights as the primary guest and booking agent. Miguel explained the logistics carefully. At 10 o'clock sharp, the key cards for the 4 canceled rooms would be deactivated. Security would be notified to expect potential conflicts. The front desk would be prepared to explain that the rooms were canceled by the primary guest and that the displaced guests would need to make alternative arrangements immediately. If they wanted to remain at the hotel, they would need to pay for new rooms themselves. I asked Miguel to schedule this room cancellation for 10:07 the next morning, while my family would be at breakfast. I wanted them to discover the situation when they tried to return to their rooms, not during a meal where they might create a scene around other diners. Miguel agreed and noted the specific timing in their system. He also offered to have security available nearby during the transition in case family members became aggressive or disruptive. That afternoon, while they were all at the pool ignoring me as usual, I had a long conversation with Mariana about what was going to happen. I showed her all the evidence I had gathered and explained my decision to cancel their rooms. I told her that she was welcome to stay with me if she wanted, but I would understand if she felt she needed to leave with her parents. This was not her fault, and I did not want her to feel caught in the middle of adult conflicts. Mariana surprised me with her response. "Grandma, I want to stay with you. I'm disgusted by how they've been treating you, and I don't want to be part of it anymore. My parents need to learn that their behavior has consequences. Maybe losing their free vacation will teach them to respect you." Her loyalty meant everything to me and confirmed that I was not overreacting to the family's treatment. That evening was surreal. I sat through dinner knowing exactly what was going to happen the next morning while they continued treating me like an inconvenient accessory to their vacation. They made plans for beach activities and restaurant reservations, completely unaware that their hotel access would be terminated in less than 15 hours. They were so confident in their control over the situation that they never imagined I might have resources or options they had not accounted for. Rafael actually thanked me during dinner for making this vacation possible, but his tone was patronizing rather than grateful. He spoke to me the way adults speak to children who have accidentally done something helpful. There was no recognition that I had made genuine sacrifices to fund this trip, no acknowledgement that I deserved to enjoy the vacation as much as anyone else. His thanks felt like another way of managing me rather than a sincere expression of appreciation. The next morning, I woke up at 6 and spent 2 hours preparing for what I knew would be a difficult day. I packed Mariana's belongings and mine, ready to leave quickly if the situation became too volatile. I organized all my documentation in a folder, ready to present evidence if anyone questioned my decision. I called Janet to let her know the plan was moving forward and asked her to be available if I needed legal support during family confrontations. At 9:30, I walked down to the lobby and positioned myself where I could observe without being seen. I wanted to witness their reaction when they discovered what had happened, partly to ensure my safety and partly to see how they handled consequences for their behavior. Miguel had assured me that security would be nearby, but I felt safer being able to see the situation develop rather than waiting in my room. At exactly 10:07, I watched Raphael try to access his room and saw his keycard fail. He tried it several times, looking confused, then walked quickly to Diego's room. Diego's card failed too. Within minutes, all 4 adults were standing in the hallway, looking bewildered and increasingly angry. Monica was the first to head toward the front desk, followed by the rest of them in a group that looked like an approaching storm. The front desk clerk, who had been briefed by Miguel, remained calm and professional as they demanded explanations. She explained that their rooms had been canceled by the primary guest and booking agent, effective immediately. When they insisted this must be an error, she showed them the cancellation documentation with my signature. When Raphael demanded to speak to a manager, Miguel appeared and confirmed that the cancellation was legitimate and final. I could not hear everything from my position in the lobby, but I could see their body language becoming increasingly agitated. Raphael was gesturing emphatically. Monica appeared to be shouting. Diego was demanding to see documentation. Anna was on her phone, presumably trying to reach me. The desk clerk maintained professional courtesy while security guards positioned themselves discreetly nearby, ready to intervene if the situation escalated. Then Raphael spotted me sitting in the lobby and stormed over with the rest of the family trailing behind him. His face was red with anger, and I could see that he was struggling to control his volume in the public space. "Mom, what the hell is going on? They're saying you canceled our rooms? This has to be some kind of mistake." I stood up slowly, picking up the folder containing all my documentation. "It's not a mistake, Raphael. I canceled your rooms because I have evidence that you plan to cheat me financially and exclude me emotionally from a vacation I funded entirely myself. I'm no longer willing to pay for people to treat me badly." "That's ridiculous," Monica interrupted. "We never planned to cheat you. You're being dramatic again, making everything about yourself. We were trying to have a nice family vacation, and you're ruining it because we didn't include you in every single activity." I opened my folder and pulled out printed screenshots of their WhatsApp messages. "I have copies of your group chat called Drama-Free Vacation, where you discussed excluding me from activities, mocking my excitement about the trip, and planning to dispute the charges with my bank after you got home. Would you like me to read some of your messages out loud, or would you prefer to discuss this privately?" The change in their expressions was immediate and dramatic. Raphael's anger shifted to shock, then to something that looked like fear. Diego stepped backward. Monica's face went pale. Anna grabbed Lisa's arm. They realized that I had evidence of everything they had said about me, and that evidence completely undermined any claim that they were innocent victims of my unreasonable behavior. "Where did you get those?" Lisa demanded. "Those were private messages." "Mariana was accidentally added to your group," I explained calmly. "She was horrified by what you were saying about me and felt I deserved to know how my family really felt. She's been helping me document everything for the past 2 days." At that moment, Mariana appeared from the elevator with both of our suitcases. "I'm staying with Grandma," she announced to her parents. "I'm embarrassed by how you've all been treating her, and I don't want to be part of it anymore. She's been nothing but generous to this family, and you've repaid her by planning to cheat her and exclude her. I think what she did was exactly right." Diego looked stricken. "Mariana, you don't understand the whole situation. We weren't trying to hurt anyone. We just thought it would be easier if you could take Grandma's money without having to actually spend time with her." Mariana finished. "I read all your messages, Dad. I know exactly what you were planning, and now you're all standing here trying to make her feel bad for protecting herself from your scheme." The lobby had become uncomfortably quiet, with other hotel guests clearly aware that some kind of family drama was unfolding. Miguel approached our group and addressed my family diplomatically. "I understand this is a difficult situation, but I need to ask you to keep your voices down for the comfort of other guests. You're welcome to use one of our conference rooms if you need privacy for family discussions." Raphael looked around and seemed to realize that their behavior was creating a public scene. Fine. But Mom, this is not over. You can't just kick your own family out of a hotel because you're having some kind of emotional breakdown. We need to talk about this reasonably. I followed them to the conference room, bringing my documentation and keeping Mariana close beside me. Once we were private, their approaches became more manipulative. Lisa started crying and talking about how much she loved me. Diego insisted that I had misunderstood their intentions. Monica claimed that the WhatsApp messages were just venting and did not represent their true feelings. Anna accused me of destroying the family over a misunderstanding, but I had spent 2 days preparing for exactly these responses. I'm not having an emotional breakdown, I told them calmly. I'm responding rationally to evidence that you plan to exploit me financially and exclude me emotionally. Your messages were not venting. They were coordination strategies for how to use me while avoiding me. That's not love. That's exploitation. Raphael tried a different approach. Okay, maybe some of the things we said were not appropriate. But you're our mother. Family forgives each other and works things out. You don't just throw people out of hotels because you're angry. That's not how family operates. Family operates on mutual respect, I replied. You've shown me through your words and actions that you don't respect me as a person. You see me as a source of funding and an obstacle to your enjoyment. I'm no longer willing to accept that dynamic, and I'm especially not willing to fund it. Then I pulled out the folder with all of my financial records and placed it on the conference table. This folder contains documentation of every sacrifice I made to fund this vacation. The wedding ring I sold, the prescriptions I delayed filling, the groceries I skipped buying, the heating bills I paid late. 8 months of cutting my life down to nothing so that I could bring this family together. And your response was to plan how to avoid me and cheat me. The room went completely silent as they looked at the papers documenting my sacrifices. I had never itemized for them exactly what this vacation had cost me personally. They had assumed the money appeared effortlessly, without understanding the specific choices I had made to prioritize their dream trip over my basic needs. I didn't know you sold your wedding ring, Diego said quietly. You didn't ask, I replied. When you called asking for money for your mortgage payment, you didn't ask how I would get that money. When Lisa needed car repairs, she didn't ask what I would sacrifice to help her. You've all learned to see me as an endless resource without considering where that resource comes from or what it costs me to provide it. Lisa was still crying, but now it seemed more genuine than manipulative. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. I knew you were paying for the trip, but I didn't understand what that meant for your finances. If I had known about the ring. What would you have done differently? I asked. Would you have insisted on paying your own way? Would you have suggested a less expensive vacation? Would you have made sure I was included in all the activities I was funding? Or would you have just felt guilty while continuing to exclude me? She could not answer that question, and her silence was the most honest response she had given me all week. Monica tried to salvage the situation. Look, we can still fix this. We can all chip in money for new rooms and start over. We can include you in everything from now on. This doesn't have to ruin the whole vacation. I don't want you to include me because you're facing consequences for excluding me, I told her. I want relationships based on genuine respect, not strategic management. And I especially don't want relationships where I have to threaten people to be treated decently. Raphael was getting angry again. So what? You're just going to end relationships with all your children because we made some mistakes? That seems pretty extreme, Mom. Families work through problems. They don't just give up on each other. I looked at him steadily. I'm not giving up on you, Raphael. I'm establishing boundaries about how I expect to be treated. You can choose to respect those boundaries and rebuild a relationship with me based on mutual consideration. Or you can continue treating me like an ATM with annoying personality traits. but I'm not going to fund my own mistreatment anymore. Then I stood up and gathered my papers. You have until checkout tomorrow to make arrangements for your remaining days here. The hotel can help you find alternative accommodations if you want to stay in the area. Mariana and I will be leaving this afternoon to finish our vacation somewhere that feels more peaceful. As I reached the door, Anna called out desperately, "Mom, please don't do this." Think about the grandchildren. Think about family traditions. Think about what Dad would have wanted. I stopped and turned back to face her. Joseph would have wanted his children to treat their mother with respect and gratitude. He would have been horrified by your WhatsApp messages and ashamed of your plan to cheat me financially. Don't invoke his memory to justify behavior he would have condemned. That afternoon, Mariana and I checked out of Beach Vista Resort and took a taxi to the Ocean View Inn, a smaller boutique hotel about 10 minutes away. Our new room had a perfect view of the sunset and a balcony where we could have coffee together in the mornings. The atmosphere was quieter, more sophisticated, and infinitely more peaceful than what we had left behind. As we unpacked in our new space, Mariana asked me how I was feeling about everything that had happened. I realized that I felt something I had not experienced in years. Free. Free from the constant anxiety about whether my family was happy with me. Free from the exhausting work of trying to earn their love and approval. Free from the financial pressure of funding people who saw me as a burden. I feel sad, I told her honestly. Sad that it came to this. Sad that they chose to see me as an obstacle rather than a gift. Sad that I waited so long to protect myself. But I also feel relief. For the first time in decades, I don't have to manage other people's reactions to my existence. I can just exist and enjoy existing. That evening, we had dinner at a restaurant where the servers were kind and attentive, where no one excluded us from conversations or made us feel invisible. We talked about books, about Mariana's college plans, about my memories of her grandfather. It was the family vacation I had dreamed about. Genuine connection, mutual respect, and shared enjoyment of beautiful surroundings. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from various family members, but I did not read them. I had said everything I needed to say in that conference room. They could choose how to respond to the boundaries I had established, but I was not going to negotiate about my right to be treated with basic respect and honesty. That right was not up for discussion. The next morning, Mariana and I walked on the beach together, collecting shells and talking about what happens next in our family relationships. I explained to her that I was not trying to punish anyone or destroy the family. I was trying to create space for healthier relationships to develop. If her parents and aunts and uncles wanted to rebuild connections with me based on mutual respect, I would be open to that. But I was never again going to fund my own mistreatment. "Grandma," she said, "I think what you did was brave. I think it was probably the first time in my life I've seen an adult actually follow through on protecting themselves from family members who were treating them badly. You taught me something important about standing up for myself." Her words meant everything to me. Maybe the greatest gift I could give this granddaughter was the example of a woman who finally learned to value herself enough to require decent treatment from others. Maybe watching me establish boundaries would help her establish healthy relationships throughout her life. Maybe this painful situation could become a positive lesson about self-respect and personal dignity. On our last day at the Ocean View Inn, I wrote letters to each of my children. Not angry letters, but clear ones. I explained that I loved them and would always love them, but that I could no longer accept relationships based on financial exploitation and emotional dismissal. I offered to work with each of them individually to rebuild our connection on healthier terms, but only if they demonstrated genuine respect for me as a person, rather than seeing me as a resource to be managed. I also wrote new beneficiary instructions for my will, replacing my children with charitable organizations and educational funds for the grandchildren. If they wanted to inherit from me, They would need to earn that privilege by treating me with respect while I was alive. I was done rewarding people who saw my generosity as an entitlement rather than a gift. The flight home felt different than any trip I had taken in years. Instead of worrying about whether everyone else was happy and comfortable, I focused on my own experience. I read a book I enjoyed, ordered the meal I wanted, and struck up a conversation with an interesting woman in the seat next to me. For once, I was not managing anyone else's emotions or calculating how to make other people's lives easier at my expense. Back home, I implemented what Dr. Williams called selective availability. I would be available for relationships with family members who demonstrated respect, honesty, and reciprocal care. I would not be available for relationships based on exploitation, manipulation, or one-sided giving. My time, energy, and resources would go toward people who valued me as a whole person rather than just a funding source. Within 2 months, the effects of my new boundaries were clear. Raphael and Monica made no effort to contact me or rebuild our relationship, apparently deciding that my terms were too challenging. Diego called several times, but only to discuss financial needs, confirming that he still saw me primarily as a resource. Lisa made one genuine attempt to understand what had happened and apologize for her role, which opened the door for cautious rebuilding between us. Most importantly, my relationship with Mariana became stronger and more authentic. Without the interference of parents who saw me as a burden, we could connect genuinely around shared interests and mutual affection. She started visiting me regularly, not because she needed anything from me, but because she enjoyed my company. That relationship became the template for what family connections could look like when based on respect rather than obligation. A year later, I used the money I had previously spent enabling my children to take Mariana on a college tour trip across the country. We visited universities together, explored new cities, and had conversations about her future that no one interrupted or managed. It was the intergenerational bonding experience I had dreamed about, but with someone who actually wanted to share it with me. The hardest part of establishing boundaries was accepting that some relationships might not survive my requirement for respect. But the alternative was continuing to fund my own marginalization while teaching my grandchildren that love means accepting mistreatment. I chose to model self-respect instead, even though it meant smaller family gatherings and fewer people in my regular life. Today, I live in a smaller world, but a more authentic one. The people in my life are there because they value me, not because they need something from me. My resources go toward causes and people that appreciate them rather than taking them for granted. My time is spent on activities and relationships that bring me joy rather than anxiety. I discovered that choosing dignity over family peace was not selfish, but necessary for everyone's emotional health. The beach vacation that was supposed to bring our family together ended up teaching us all important lessons about respect, boundaries, and the difference between love and exploitation. My children learned that their mother was not an endless resource without feelings or rights. I learned that protecting myself from mistreatment was not cruelty, but wisdom. And Mariana learned that standing up for yourself sometimes requires difficult choices, but that those choices can lead to more authentic and fulfilling relationships. Sometimes we discover our strength in the most unexpected moments. And that was today's story about finding the courage to put yourself first. If you enjoyed it, subscribe here. There are many more stories like this waiting for you.